Pests beware, your fields have heroes. The Pests and Predators podcast is brought to you by Field Heroes and is powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Learn how beneficial insects fight pests and protect your crops. Visit fieldheroes.ca today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 at Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Tuesday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, of course, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Now, we are recording here early Tuesday morning because it's cabinet day today. We're going to know who is in Mark Carney's cabinet. Rumors are less than 30, but also bringing back this idea of junior ministers, secretaries of state. I think they're talking about 10 of them. We'll see who is going to be the Minister of Agriculture. Toronto Star believes Cody Blois is not in the cabinet. So we'll have to wait and see. Because we're doing this Tuesday before the cabinet, we're going to do a bonus segment today for the RealAg Radio podcast listeners. So if you're listening on Rural Radio, check out the podcast version of the show, and I'm going to give my instant reaction and breakdown of what we see once cabinet is named here today. We'll have more reaction on the show tomorrow as well. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also, of course, call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. And today on the show, we got Erin Gowriluk from Canada Grains Council. She has written, Canada Grains Council has written a letter, probably polite, very Canada-like, but a bit of a two-handed shove for the Prime Minister. And here's what you can do to really accomplish some of your economic goals. And by the way, agriculture plays a significant part in that. So just a heads up for you. We're going to have a product spotlight today with Bear Crop Science. Looking forward to that. We got Derryn Shrosbree from 33.7, part 4 of our continuity conversations. Bit of a morbid topic today. Get ready for it. The title is, Who Gets Your Stuff When You Die? A bit of shock value there to get you started. And then we're going to talk to Geoff Cooper, CEO of the Renewable Fuels Association in Washington, D.C. Caught up with Geoff last week when I was in D.C. And, of course, biofuels more and more cross-border conversation. It is a cross-border conversation. I know biofuels does not come up as much in the Canadian market as it does in the U.S., but, you think about demand for canola, for example, well, that's the U.S. market. And there is a lot of U.S. industry participants, farmers, and as well as some of the processors and producers that are accessing the CFR in Canada and using it as well. So this is a very more and more of an integrated supply chain, North American market, and we need to understand it better. I want to say we, I mean the Canadian market needs to understand it better and what's actually happening, and I always love talking to Geoff Cooper from the RFA. Feedback. Well, okay, so if you heard Friday's show, and you listen to the bonus segment, you know it. So we're gliding into the weekend. We just done the show. It was a really good show. It was very interesting, and it was fun. And then we decided to do a bonus segment, and Tyler McCann from Cappy, him and I got into one of the most spirited, heated debates that we have probably ever had here on this show. And not intended, but it definitely spurred a lot of feedback and reaction. And some funny pictures and things like that too. I think people kind of enjoyed it. And we talked about Western separation. We talked about national unity, and these are topics right up there with politics and religion, I think, at this point. And try to provoke. Yeah, I think overall we had some people that thought I was nuts. One person said they were very disappointed in me. We had people who were very angry at Tyler for his position and not understanding Alberta and Western alienation. And then we had a whole bunch of people that just enjoyed the fact that this was out in the open and felt that it was a debate worth having. So I appreciate everyone's feedback on this. I did get an email from a regular listener who provided a 5-point plan on what needs to happen from Carney's perspective. 1, Guilbeault and Wilkinson do not receive high-profile prominent cabinet positions. 2, C-69 out. 3, a pipeline energy corridor is put into motion. 4, a commitment with tangible specifics related to regulatory reform, interprovincial trade, CFIA, stuff like that. And 5, a minister and or small respected advisory group reporting directly to the Prime Minister is put in place with responsibility for Western relations. We'll see what Carney does. I think that's a great 5-point plan. I appreciate listener feedback, well thought out listener feedback. Exactly like that. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we got Erin Gowriluk from Canada Grains Council. We're talking about the letter to the Prime Minister right after this.
I am your host, Lindsay Smith. Joining me now, Scott Bishop, the National Sales Manager for Exotic Technologies. What is Invita? How does it fit into farmers' operations?
Invita is a naturally occurring bacteria. What this bacteria is able to do is capture that N3 from the air and convert it to a usable form for the plant as the plant calls for nitrogen. So once you get Invita into that plant, it's going to replicate. It's going to spread from the roots up through the plant to the newest growing point. We're one of the very few bacteria that actually gets inside the plant cell. Beyond the yield increase, you're going to see increased root mass. The original fear was it's going to affect nodulation. It does not affect nodulation, but it almost increases it because of the expanded roots under that plant. With corn, you're going to see additional brace roots. All crops, you're going to see a healthier plant because there's no stoppage of that plant growing. That plant, as it demands nitrogen, is going to be able to capture it from the air and convert it into a usable form.
So for those who are interested, where can they go for more information?
To our website, exotic.com.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch WheatPete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Hey, don't put your yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations that honestly, imitator brands just can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca. Okay, lots happening. Today we are going to have the naming of the new cabinet, and Prime Minister Carney has a lot of decisions to make. We're hoping we'll see what happens from an ag perspective, but there's also a whole policy side of the new Carney government that many stakeholders in agriculture are very interested in terms of how all this works. So joining us right now to talk about a letter written to Prime Minister Carney. We'll find out what kind of letter, how stiff the letter was. We're talking to Erin Gowriluk, who is with Canada Grains Council. Erin, how are we doing?
Great. Thank you very much, Shaun.
So how stiff was the letter? Was it like a friendly nudge kind of letter? I don't think it would be like a love letter, but it would, I think there's some things that you want him to be working on.
Look, it's an introductory letter. It's certainly very congenial, but I think, look, at the end of the day, we're going to have the tough conversations about specifically what we need to do once the cabinet is formed and we have those individuals in place to have those conversations. At this point right now, it's looking for alignment between what it is that the agriculture industry needs from this government and what Prime Minister Carney has committed to doing. And I'm excited to say, as reflected in our open letter to the Prime Minister, we have a lot of alignment. I'm feeling very optimistic. We'll learn more, to your point, once the cabinet is in place. But we essentially have called for three things from a high-level perspective.
Okay.
The first thing is around national unity. And he talked about this in his remarks the night of the election when he formed a minority government. There is a need for national unity, I think, on a number of fronts. And the first one is most obvious, and that is with respect to what's happening south of the border. We need national unity amongst the federal parties as they work towards a solution. We need national unity between the federal government and all of the provinces. And we need unity amongst ag sector stakeholders. And I think that Carney has talked about the need to achieve unity. And there's nothing better in our view than reaching out to the agriculture sector as a national unity project in action. If you want to touch and have a positive impact on rural communities in every province across the country, work with agriculture, work to ensure that the sector can reach its full potential. And you'll be able to advance policies that bring farmers together from both East and Western Canada. And he's made a commitment to do that. So I would suggest one place to start is through agriculture. And I think that internationally, we need to hit a reset button. And I'm not just talking about what's happening with the Trump administration in the US, with China, and with India. But when I travel internationally, and I talked about this in the letter, we're hearing from international stakeholders that the world needs more Canada, and they need a different Canada. We need a bolder Canada. And we can talk more in a moment, Shaun, about that, how we show up in some of those international multilateral forums and the role that the US has historically played. We're going to need an advocate for diplomacy, for science. And that is an important role that Canada can play because we're well positioned to do that as a trusted advisor. And then finally, in the letter, we talk from a high level perspective. And look, if you have a prime minister who is committed to the economy, and he has made that point front and center. But I think it was interesting to see in his remarks, his first remarks as prime minister, when he addressed the nation, he talked about science. We believe in science. And that's obviously a direct reflection of what's happening in the United States. That bodes well for the agriculture sector, because what we need now is a regulatory framework that reflects that commitment to science, because that's going to help drive the Canadian economy when we reassure many of those private companies that this is a place where you can do business.
But that belief in science has to happen with some sort of like speed or velocity to it, because I think sometimes you can, if you just say, hey, we need to be, science-based, we get bogged down in the science.
Yeah, I think what the first thing that we can do is, look, the first example that we have from a council perspective in terms of what we can do here in Canada is hit the pause on the transformation agenda, which we know from the Pest Management Regulatory Agency that was politically motivated. There's no denying that. So it's time now to hit the pause button on the transformation agenda, which has cost us upwards of $80 million to this point and achieved absolutely nothing for the agriculture industry. Once we can hit the pause button on that and acknowledge that it's moving in the wrong direction, then we need to have the right conversation about how we ensure agencies like the PMRA work to make the ag sector more competitive and that their policies are rooted in science. And so that's the first conversation we're going to have. Hit the pause button and look to the industry for some recommendations on what transformation really looks like and how that transformation is very clearly going to align with the objectives so far that Prime Minister Carney has stated around the economy and science-driven policies.
From a trade perspective, what do you want trade to look like, or the attention it gets? How do you want that to look different than the Trudeau regime?
I think acknowledging the important role that trade plays in advancing key sectors like Canada's agriculture sector, I think, and considering the impact that some of these international decisions have on the agriculture sector, because I think we can all agree that under the previous administration, little consideration was given to some of how of these short-term reactions, these political reactions, the impact that would have on the agriculture industry. We no longer are the sacrificial lamb. We cannot be. And so consider the impact that those decisions are going to have on Canada's agriculture industry and think carefully about the decisions you take and the impact they'll have. And I'm optimistic that this government is going to give the sector more consideration and be more pragmatic in their approach to the relationships with these important trading partners. That, coupled, I think, with a renewed diversification strategy, is going to be really important. And I'm not suggesting for a second that this is easy. We know that the challenge that we face right now with respect to what's happening in the United States and China is a very fine line to walk. It's not going to be an easy one, but we need to see the Canadian government in particular at a very high level back to the table, having those conversations with Chinese officials. It's a critically important market, and it's one that we need to work to restore.
You mentioned, or you emphasize, collaboration with government from an industry perspective. What does that look like?
Look, we can point to a whole host of examples, and very often, and I'm sure, Shaun, in the conversations that you've had previously with ministers and officials. They'll point to a whole host of roundtables, working groups, committees, and councils that were struck to engage the agriculture industry. That's not the kind of engagement that we're looking for at this point. I think what we're looking for is outcomes-based, no longer process-based. And so we pointed to all of those forums through which what? To what end? So I think we need to be laser focused on what we're trying to achieve and figure out the best means to get there. And that may not necessarily be the establishment of another advisory committee or council, but working quickly with the sector. We've done the work. We know what the sector needs to do, and they need to work quickly with a very competent, capable, and I would suggest an ag minister who is free to take those decisions and has a prominent place at the cabinet table to work closely with the industry and bring those challenges to the cabinet table in an effort to advance them. That's what we're going to need to see when Prime Minister Carney strikes his new cabinet.
Are there things that in your mind that Canada could be doing to better attract, whether that's domestic capital into the sector or international capital into the sector, whether that's in processing, whether that's in ag tech, innovation? What are your thoughts there?
I can think of a couple of things. I think the first one would be to the earlier point around creating an environment of predictability. And that science-based regulatory framework is going to be critically important to creating that predictability in an environment where investors can trust that Canada is a place worthy of their investment. And we're going to create a framework that will shepherd that investment in the Canadian economy. And I think the other piece is, and Carney talked about this in one of his opening speeches, Shaun, and that was around spend less, invest more. And I'll tell you how I interpret that, or what I hope that means. What I hope that means from a banker's perspective is that we're going to look strategically at sectors that can offer a return on investment, and we're going to double down on our investment in those sectors. We're going to make those contributions strategic and meaningful in an effort to help them reach their full potential because they can catalyze the Canadian economy. And so I hope that we are going to continue to take I hope that Carney is going to follow through on that commitment to make those investments both strategic and meaningful.
Agriculture would be one of those sectors I'm assuming you're thinking of?
It would be. And I think that what we have seen, as we've seen from the previous government, is the spending, in my view, was largely politically motivated. And so you would see a little money for this group and a little money for this sector. And I think you have to be more strategic in those investments. And frankly, at the end of the day, that means picking winners and losers, and you have to hone in on those high potential sectors that can really deliver. And we can point to a whole host of reports, and Barton was one of them, where he identified under the previous government a number of those high potential sectors. Ag is one of them, and so we have to make those investments where they really count.
What if they think ag's not in that club?
You know what? I think to a certain extent, that's on us. And so first of all, two things. We're going to be watching to see who the Prime Minister appoints as the Agriculture Minister, because I think we need someone who brings a new level of energy and enthusiasm. And I think that choice is also going to reflect the prominence that they have at the cabinet table. But I think as industry, two doors, I think, have opened for us, certainly from a council perspective. One as it relates to the economy, and the other as it relates to science and innovation. It's up to us now to walk through those doors. And I think we have to bring a very aligned message as an industry to this government, because they do need to work quickly. They are in a minority situation where I think that the Prime Minister feels he has a lot to deliver in a short period of time. What are some of the low-hanging fruit that they can deliver on behalf of the industry? We have to articulate that clearly and consistently as an industry. And I think that we need to provide a vision for where we could ultimately go and align those asks with where the government wants to go. And it's going to be much easier for us to do that under this administration than it was with the previous administration, because the economy will be front and center.
Yeah, there are some people in the audience that really feel strongly that one big difference we're going to see with Carney is moving fast on things. And a part of that is because of, and we talked about this on RealAg Radio on last Friday, which in the bonus segment, if you haven't heard that, you should go back and listen to it, everybody, produced a very emotional discussion. Because of the national unity issues, and because national unity is it has is important to him, and I think is one of his greatest challenges. He needs to show some action. And I think some people really believe that that's what we're going to get out of him, that will be different.
Yeah. And look, I'm an Albertan living in the province of Quebec, so I'm kind of hypersensitive to what's happening at the provincial level and the need to bring that kind of unity, not just in terms of what we saw previously under Trudeau's government, just when in response to what was happening south of the border. But I think now beyond that, in addressing some of the issues that are taking place at the provincial level. And I would suggest, and Shaun, you'll know better than I know in terms of how the conversations are going in particular with your premier, but I think having some of those early conversations and a real commitment to the economic development that has to occur also at the provincial level is going to go a long way. And that's why I think the conversation needs to start with agriculture, because you have that presence in every province across the country. And if you want to see that kind of unity, if you want to bring the country together, you can do that in rural communities from Quebec to Alberta and beyond by working closely with the agriculture industry. So that's clearly articulated in our letter to the Prime Minister. Leverage the ag sector for that.
Great stuff. Hey, Erin, thanks a lot for joining us here today on RealAg Radio. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Great stuff. Erin Gowriluk from Canada Grains Council. Hey, understanding the challenges you face, Nutrien Ag Solutions works with you to find the right solution every time. Nutrien Ag Solutions is one partner, all in. Visit nutrienagsolutions.ca to learn how their offerings work together to support your operation. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
Find everything you need for outstanding weed control in your wheat and barley from the cross-spectrum herbicide experts at Corteva. Corteva is proud to offer a wide selection of cross-spectrum herbicides for maximum convenience, effective resistance management, and customized control of your toughest grassy and broadleaf weeds. No matter what kind of weed challenges you're experiencing, we've got the right fit for your farm. Visit corteva.ca to learn more.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern. Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM. I am Lindsay Smith, and joining me now, it's Kurtis Pilkington. He's a customer solutions agronomist with Bayer Crop Science based near Guelph, Ontario. Welcome here, Kurtis.
Thank you, Lindsay.
All right. It is, of course, very busy time of year, so thanks for taking time out of your scouting schedule to join us here on the show. This is a prime time to be on the lookout for those weeds, those early weeds that we really need to get out of the road. And of course, thinking about disease pressure as well. How is Bayer delivering peace of mind for growers?
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. So I immediately think of winter wheat and where we're at right now, trying to make sure our herbicides are covered, and we're starting to look at fungicides as well, all while planting and field work's going on. So luckily, Bayer's got a great slate of products with Infinity FX on the herbicide side, and then Delero Complete Stratego Pro on the fungicide side to cover really all of your bases with any sort of wheat management that needs to happen in the next few weeks.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are you getting calls about? Because, of course, always it is a busy time of year. We've got crop going in the ground, but as you mentioned, we've got that wheat crop, sort of in those critical stages. What are growers asking about? What's top of mind?
Yeah, so two main things that I've been hearing. First off, we've had kind of a colder start to the spring, and so I've been getting quite a few calls about cold temperatures and what's safe temps to apply. And my rule of thumb there is always the rule of threes. So if day or nighttime temperatures are should be above 3 degrees Celsius 3 days before and 3 days after application. a part of the cold temperatures early on too that we've seen is some of the herbicide applications that would have normally gone down earlier haven't been done. And so I'm getting a lot of questions about tank mixes. Can I tank mix my herbicide with my fungicide? What about if we had a PGR in there? And when you're having those questions, it's always best to talk to your chemical rep and your ag retailer. But for Bayer products, Infinity FX is safe to tank mix with our fungicides like Delero Complete, Stratego Pro, and additionally a PGR if needed. A great thing to remember, though, whenever you're adding more products to the tank, there's an increased risk that you're going to see some surfactant burn. So increase that water volume, spray at 20 gallons an acre, and make sure you're being as safe as you can if you're going with a more complex mix.
Mm-hmm. Very good advice. Make sure you keep that water volume up. So important. All right. Now, looking ahead, as you mentioned, definitely disease challenges ahead. And if we didn't get those weeds taken care of, time is of the essence. So thinking ahead, what are some of those challenges that growers will be facing soon that you really want to keep disease control or weed control top of mind?
Yeah. So one of the things I've been out in fields and watching for right now quite a bit is foliar disease in the wheat crop. And right now is about the prime time to start scouting for stripe rust if that happens to appear this year. It was a big issue last year in Ontario. We'll have to see if it shows up again. But if it hasn't been done already, it's about time to start thinking about a late T1 application if needed. So sort of what some might call that T1.5 application. And that would give you protection to carry you through up to your T3. So Delero Complete is a fantastic product. For that, works great on all rusts, on septoria, downy mildew, really any of your foliar diseases you're going to see in wheat. And then once we're through that stage, we're going to start thinking about our T3 application timing. And again, make sure we're out scouting the crop for that. It's a pretty short window of application. We need to make sure that's going down when those flowers are emerged on the wheat head. And the solution there is Prezero Pro to protect you against Fusarium head blight. Excellent product that does a great job of keeping that disease away from the wheat crop. Another thing I'll throw out too, so Delero Complete, the same thing that we're using on our winter wheat, we can use that on all of our crops throughout the season. So when we're thinking about disease problems in soybeans and corn too, it's a fantastic fungicide to deal with tar spot and white mold as well later in season.
I feel like it's too early to talk about tar spot, but it's never
everyone's
too early.
favorite topic,
right? Yeah, exactly. Now, but you did mention stripe rust, so I did want to just touch on that one just quickly because I think there were some indications earlier this season already that it could be an issue down in the States. Walk us through just quickly, where does this disease come from, and where would we be scouting for it first on the plant?
Yeah, for sure. So stripe rust is an interesting disease. It's not one that overwinters in Ontario, and so it's blown up from the States. So we can kind of get a clue as to if it's going to arrive based on where it's tracking in the States and where it's been found. So key identifier for it, we've got a few different types of rust in wheat, but for stripe rust, it's going to be a light yellow color instead of a darker orange that you see more with common rust. And you want to be looking on the leaves for it. So look down in the canopy. It's going to be more of a striped pattern on the leaf surface, not random like you'd see with common rust.
Okay, really key. All right, Kurtis, for anyone who's got any questions or about products or about scouting, those sorts of things, where can they go for more information?
For sure. So get in touch with your local Bayer rep, talk to your ag retailer, or go check out BayerCropScience.ca for any other information on products as well.
All right, Kurtis, thank you so much and happy scouting. We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today. It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM. Hey, it's tagging time, and CCIA has you covered. Their online web store is your one-stop shop for approved beef cattle tags and pre-approved cervid and goat tags. Order anytime, anywhere. It's fast and reliable. Visit tags.canadaid.ca, your trusted source of traceability. Well, it's now time for part 4 of Continuity Conversation with Derryn Shrosbree of 33.7. Got a lot of great feedback on this series. Today, we're going to hear a discussion about who gets your stuff when you die. Enjoy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, Shaun, thanks again. It's great to see you. So if you want to recap the pretty abysmal stats of continuity planning, 88% of Canadian farmers don't have a plan. That beggars the question, are you farming for your own family or are you farming for the government? Because without a plan, you're starting to farm for the government because the loss of acreage and the loss of money is going to be staggering. $600 billion of farmland is going to change hands in the next 10 years. This is, by the way, FCC stats. I didn't make this stuff up. So without a continuity plan, you're in really a bit of a pickle. The low-hanging fruit of continuity planning, if you don't, for whatever reason, decide to do one or have one, the easiest and, like I said, the low-hanging fruit of continuity planning is who gets your stuff when you die, right? So that in normal language is a will. So who has a will? Who has a
Not enough.
Will?
Not enough.
Well, way lower than 12%, because only 12% of people have a continuity plan, and even fewer than those have a will. So it's quite baffling that people don't have a will. And I think there's two reasons for that. One, it's kind of a macabre topic. You don't really want to talk about your mortality. It's a bit morose. And then secondly, once again, it's the barrier to entry. It's like, where do I start? What do I do? What are the questions I have to ask, et cetera, et cetera. So if it became simple where you could, for example, just jump on a Zoom and get someone to ask you the 20 relevant questions, you talk, it's recorded, and then it's written down, sent to you, and you sign off, that you get the will quite quickly. So I don't know why it hasn't been done yet, but that's the new way to do it, is to find someone who will do that for you. What the will does, once you do have it written down, is obviously it directs traffic. Because if you don't have it written down, the fights and the family breaking apart becomes quite severe. Yeah. Because good fences make good neighbors. Even if your children are all having supper together now, they have spouses, they have different agendas, they want different things. And if it's not written down, well, then it's a free-for-all. So the free-for-all not only wrecks your family, but the government has to step in, and there's a rules-based engine of who gets what. So you might work your entire life in the farm, and the exact person that you don't want the acreage to go to gets the acreage. So it's a very, very simple, quick fix. And you can write it down on toilet paper if you want. Like if you have a voice memo, just leave a voice memo, send it to 10 people. That's a will. If you actually wanted to get a Sharpie and write it on toilet paper and give it to someone, that's still a will. It's all binding to an extent. As you've seen in the past, lots of people are now, there's a lot of wills that are being, contested, et cetera, et cetera. Undue influence is the most recent one, where people are like, oh, my dad gave everything to my sister, but there was undue influence, which means that she coerced him into giving her the acreage when I should get the acreage. But dude, you lived in New York for 10 years and you never went to the acreage. Why should you get it? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So taking away those simple conversations is all will-based. And generally speaking, you need a personal will. So for you, you need a secondary will or a corporate will, right? And then you need a power of attorney as well, POA. A power of attorney is kind of important in case the combine doesn't actually kill you. It just incapacitates you to a point where you cannot make decisions. So who's going to make the decisions for the farm? Once again, if that's left open to interpretation, generally speaking, according to Murphy's Law, you're kind of going to get the person you don't want making your decisions, right? And these are avoidable, Shaun. They're so simple. Like it's a 20-minute conversation with me or someone who's competent at getting them done.
Yeah, and not exactly an expensive step. That's like there's not this big financial barrier in front of making it happen. It's just a case of taking the initiative to do it and keep it updated. I think that's another part of it. Like, if things change over time, you acquire, new things and, your business grows or, your personal wealth or situation changes. Maybe you have grandkids now and you didn't have grandkids before, and relying on a will from, say, 15 or 20, 25 years ago, it may not be up to date, and it may be just as inaccurate as not even having one.
Oh, 100% agreed, yes. And to your point about the cost, there are online portals that you can spend $100 and get your will done.
Yeah.
It's not the best, but you can get it done. If you have an enterprise because farming is a bit more complicated. There's tax-exempt assets versus taxable assets. There's different businesses. And generally speaking, there's a lot of family members. So it is a little bit more complicated. So the online will situation might not be a good idea. You probably need a family lawyer or someone who knows about continuity planning to get it done. But yes, it takes a basic will, 30 minutes to an hour. You can do it while you're driving your combine, right? All you have to do is talk. You don't even have to take your eyes off the road. So 30 minutes to an hour to get 80% of the will done. And all it is a conversation. So It's not that difficult anymore. And if you did that, if you went, because I presume you're in your combine once a year when you're either seeding or harvesting or whatever the case may be, right? You could update it every single year, 30 minutes. It's not that hard.
Yeah. And what you're trying to do here is avoid, like you put it well, where everybody's getting along. But if we don't have clear direction, we run into this situation, and so many families inside agriculture and outside of agriculture go through this. How many times have you heard the phrase, well, I know what mom and dad would have wanted, or, mom wanted this, or, you never really, you really don't understand what dad would have wanted.
Right.
And those are all perceptions. They may have been conversations. It becomes a case of he said, she said, and really, this is the kind of stuff that can start the breakup of a family, which is what we're trying to avoid here.
Correct. Why are we farming? We're farming for the next generation, right? I'm a farmer. I have 3 boys. I'm farming for them. And my will specifically states who's on farm and who's off farm. If that changes, the formulas that I've written in my will change, right? So that everyone still has supper together. Because why farm if your family gets torn apart because of A, money, and B, a lack of communication? And that's all it is. It's you communicating what you want for the next generation. Yeah. And don't forget that a lot of farmers are like, well, they don't allow themselves permission to do what they want because they're constantly like, oh, who else, what else, this, that, the next thing. It's like, no. It's your farm. You farmed it. You own it. What do you want, right? Do you want to control from the grave? That's a legacy control thing. That's heavy. Do you want to be stewarding or pushing mildly from the grave? Or do you want a complete and unbridled show, right? That's the do nothing part. The do nothing part is if you don't do anything, it's going to end in interpretation, is what you said. And interpretation, there's 10 different people in a room. There's 10 different opinions. That leads to complete and utter breakdown, which is once again 100% avoidable. It's totally avoidable, and it's cheap and it's fast. So
well, and the other part of this too is, and this may be this may be sort of sound outlandish or crazy, but remember where you put it. Remember where you did it. And I heard of a situation not too long ago where the patriarch of the family had done a will, doesn't remember what lawyer he went to because he's having some memory issues, and doesn't know where he put it.
Yeah.
And now there's some health challenges in the family, and it's created a little bit of a problem. And so that sounds kind of like elementary in terms of remember where you did it and where you put it, but it's not a bad idea to make sure maybe more than one person knows.
tell you, the basics is often overlooked, and I think that's a great point. When we do wills for our folks, we use 6 copies. So 6 copies sealed in a manila envelope with a tag on the outside saying exactly what it is, and we give it to 6 different people. Yeah. So we give it to the primary and the secondary lawyer, the primary accountant, secondary if you have, a farm coach. Most farmers have coaches, right? Whether it's a business coach, life coach, et cetera, and then we used to, this is a long time ago, safety deposit boxes, but you don't really do those anymore. But yes, any of your professional services team, if you have an investment advisor, give it to them, like physical copies so that they can keep it at their office. Every professional services advisor should have a big filing cabinet with paper. Generally speaking, they do. And they have a file that has your name on it. They slide it into that file. So when you do eventually die, everyone who has money attached to you will have a copy of that. Right? Then it can't be disputed, and it's well rounded, right? So if you have a continuity planner like myself or whomever else, or like, let's say, Elaine Fraze, that's a great one to give it to, or myself or whomever it is, yeah. So yes, where and who is very important, yeah.
Who should be the power of attorney? I think a lot of people know kind of well, maybe let's start there. What does that person do?
So that person will make decisions for the farm or the business, and which relates to the family in the event that you're incapacitated, cannot make decisions, but are not dead. You're in that kind of limbo state. Generally speaking, you want to, first and foremost, the power of attorney has to be someone you trust, because they're going to be making decisions on your behalf. So you need to know them well, and you need to trust them. Another thing is be careful of conflict of interest. The conflict of interest is if your power of attorney has material interest in the enterprise, they can steer it to what they want, right? Because the third parties don't know what conversation you and the power of attorney have had. You can't speak anymore. You're down. But the power of attorney can then move assets and do things on the farm or the business that might not be to your wishes. So generally speaking, it's someone you trust and someone who's not materially involved in the enterprise and the value of the enterprise. Once again, professional services are good. You can do your brother or your sister if they're not part of the farm, if they live in, whatever, and they're not really part of it, and you trust them and you have a good relationship, that's good. Aunt, uncle, et cetera, something like that.
If you're farming with your brother or your sister, that's not a good idea.
Well, it's done. It's definitely done. If the alignment is extremely tight and everyone is, rowing in the same direction, then yes, the on-farm brother could be a good idea. You just have to be cautious of the two things, which is one, are you steering in the right direction? Is there any conflict of interest there? That's the conflict of interest is the big one. And 2 is obviously trust. But if you're farming with your brother and you love him to bits, you trust him. So that takes care of that one. Just watch out for the conflict of interest.
Great stuff. Hey, Derryn, thanks a lot for joining us here today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Great to chat.
That was Derryn Shrosbree, CEO of 33.7. Great discussion. We got all those interviews. We got 7 parts coming out. 1 through 3 is posted at RealAgriculture.com. You can check that out by searching Continuity Conversations. Don't put your yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands just can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after this.
If you only listen to RealAg Radio, you only get half the picture. For greater insight into the issues that affect farming, tune in to RealAgriculture.com. Crops, livestock, machinery, farm management, and the markets, even food and travel. Real Agriculture Online digs deeper into the topics that affect the way you work and live. So get connected today. Read, watch, and listen to the people who know at RealAgriculture.com.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
At Alliance Seed, every seed starts the story of your success, and top-performing seed varieties are tailored to meet the unique challenges of your farm. Discover the Alliance difference at allianceseed.com. Well, last week I was in Washington, D.C., as we chatted about, and I had a chance to catch up to talk about biofuels with the CEO of the Renewable Fuels Association, the RFA. It is Geoff Cooper. Always enjoy getting caught up to speed on what is the latest in biofuel policy in the United States, because it has an impact on the Canadian market as well. Very integrated. We talk about this from a beef and pork perspective, but more and more, biofuels is a cross-border conversation. Here's my discussion with Geoff Cooper, CEO of the RFA.
See you again.
Good to see you, Shaun.
Well, nothing happening in biofuels, my friend. Like it's calm waters, everything's good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I guess we are 100 days into the administration. What do we know about the president's position on biofuels?
Well, we've been very excited by the president's positioning on biofuels and really the entire cabinet. They've been very supportive. We saw on day one of this administration, in some of the executive orders that President Trump was publishing, biofuels were prominently mentioned as an energy source that deserves prioritization and as an energy source that's part of the president's strategy for American energy dominance. So we've been very enthusiastic and excited to see that. And so far, I mean, the administration has been delivering on those commitments that ethanol belongs in that group of energy sources that should be prioritized.
What are the gaps then? Because what you just described a pretty calm situation.
Yeah, right.
So where's the gap?
I'd say the biggest gaps are a lot of things were left undone by the previous administration, whether that's the renewable fuel standard volume obligations that we're waiting on. E15 was sort of left unresolved by the Biden administration. The tax policy, 45Z, 45Q, a lot of those things were just kind of left unresolved when the Biden administration left town. So the Trump administration is trying to pick up all those pieces and figure out how to best move forward and move forward as quickly as possible to support further growth in the industry. We've already seen some positive announcements from the administration on E15. They've issued some emergency waivers that will allow retailers to continue selling E15 this summer. That's sort of a Band-Aid fix. We still need Congress to come in and do legislation that would permanently fix that issue. And then on the renewable fuel standard volumes, we are expecting in the next few weeks, probably by Memorial Day or shortly thereafter, to see EPA's proposed volumes for the RFS for next year and 2027.
We're seeing the price of oil come down. We're hovering around that $50 to $55. For the fracking industry, that's kind of a break-even point.
Yep.
How does that $50 to $55 impact what happens in the biofuel sector?
Well, I mean, it's certainly a factor, but the most important factor in the ethanol margin is corn price. And we've seen ethanol prices really pinned to corn prices over the last probably 10 years. If corn prices go up, ethanol prices go up and vice versa. Certainly oil prices are a factor. If ethanol is price competitive with gasoline at the rack, that's going to help spur demand. And even with lower oil prices, we are still seeing ethanol priced very competitively with gasoline at the wholesale level. But, hopefully we got this big corn crop coming. Hopefully we're going to grind as much corn as possible, keep making more ethanol, growing into new markets like E15 and really hopefully help improve that margin structure. Right now, margins have been pretty thin this year so far.
Yeah. 45Z, what do we know now?
Well, what we know is there's still a lot of unanswered questions on 45Z. The Treasury, again, right before Biden left office, published what they called a notice of intent to propose regulations.
So some guidance?
And so some loose guidance that's still hanging out there. We don't have a proposed rule. We certainly don't have a final rule from the Treasury. And when we talk to them, they say, well, look, we're kind of waiting to see what Congress has to say about 45Z and about the Inflation Reduction Act. Through this budget reconciliation process, there's a decent chance that some of those credits could be reformed could be changed, could be removed in some cases. We feel pretty good that about the chances of 45Z being spared from any kind of repeal, but it could absolutely undergo some changes.
And there's, depending on how those environmental, like the carbon intensity scores, the White House really doesn't like those. I guess it feels like from the prior administration.
Yep.
And so it's not a lot of nuance in D.C. Those things get kicked out, and then all of a sudden, what are we left? We don't know really what 45Z is.
That's exactly right. I think what we think is a good chance of happening is a sort of rebranded 45Z program. Yeah. You're right. I think, when Republicans get a hold of 45Z and start talking about ways of improving and changing and fixing some of the flaws with that program, what they come back with is probably going to be called something different. It's going to look different. But we know, bottom line, if we want things like sustainable aviation fuel, if we want to see continued growth in renewable diesel, biodiesel, that's going to take some tax policy. It's going to take some tax support. Yeah. So it just depends on what shape that takes. I think that's kind of what everybody's waiting to see.
Yeah, for some of the audience that's out of the ethanol belt, year-round E15.
Yep.
Why is it taking? A long story, I know. Why is it taking so long, and how big of an impact would it actually have on the industry?
Well, the short answer on timing is there haven't been any opportunities, there haven't been any vehicles to move that legislation through Congress. It's not going to move as a standalone measure. It's going to have to ride along with a larger must-pass piece of legislation, and there just haven't been many of those. We had the CR bill in December. E15 was part of that, and then it fell out at the very last minute. There was another CR in March. We didn't quite make the cut there either. So there's plenty of support. There's really no opposition. Both sides of the aisle, both chambers are wanting to get this done. It's just there's been a lack of legislative vehicles moving. In terms of what it would mean for the industry, if we went from E10 to E15 nationwide, we'd be talking about boosting corn demand by 1.8, 2 billion bushels. Yeah, that'd be another 5 or 6 billion gallons of ethanol. Of course, that's not going to happen overnight, but that shows the scale and scope of the opportunity with E15.
Great stuff. Hey, Geoff, thanks a lot for joining us. I really appreciate it, and all the best to you.
All right, thanks, Shaun.
Great stuff there with Geoff Cooper, CEO of the RFA. And of course, we're trying to be as on top of biofuel issues as much as possible here at RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com. Now, we recorded this early on Tuesday morning. Don't know who is in the cabinet yet, but if you are interested, you can always download the RealAg Radio podcast, where I will have a breakdown and a list, an instant right away reaction when it comes to who is named in the cabinet. Is Cody Blois in? Is he out? Was the star correct? We'll have to see. And who gets the rest of the portfolios? As I mentioned last Friday, I think a big thing for Western Canada is Wilkinson and Guilbeault. Where do they land? And will they land out or inside cabinet? If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also, of course, call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio, and we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody. Welcome to the bonus, everybody. It's the bonus. I don't know why when I say that I throw my arms in the air, but we are here. And yes, this is my, I haven't had a lot of time here to break all this down, but I wanted to make sure that we were as current as possible for those of you that are listening to the Real Ag Radio podcast. And we do appreciate very much you downloading this podcast and making us part of your day. We greatly appreciate it. So we got news out on the cabinet. There is a lot of fresh faces here. This is a fresh crop of Liberal ministers. So obviously Prime Minster Carney was trying to, say, hey, I know you were a big deal in the Trudeau government, but for a lot of you, you are on the outside. Well, somebody else that's on the outside is Cody Blois, former ag minister. He was ag minister for a week, but I'll say this. He was everyone's pick. So you got to put this in perspective. So listen, the Conservatives win the election. Everybody is going to be assuming John Barlow was the pick. Now, having said that, there was going to be a lot of rural MPs that would have a fancy for being the ag minister. But Barlow had kind of, put in his time, so to speak. Well, that's one thing. In this case with the Liberals, there was not this deep bench of rural MPs to be the ag minister. And because he had put his time in, everybody was like, it's Cody Blois's. And listen, I was at the CFA leaders debate. I was the moderator. I thought Blois did exceptional. And the fact that he is not going to be the Minister of Agriculture has nothing to do with the performance at that debate. But let me tell you this. He was exceptional. I described it on the show. This was his coming out party. There is massive disappointment. And this is no reflection whatsoever on Heath MacDonald, who today was named as the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. Says, my comments about Blois are not a reflection on him. We're going to get to know him. We're going to get him on the show here as soon as we possibly can. Because I think he needs to introduce himself to the industry. Not a lot of people are be running around saying, he's MacDonald. I had him. He was on my bingo card. He's going to need an introduction. But back to Blois. This is a guy that had been on the Ag Committee. He was chair of the Ag Committee. He had the respect of industry. One ag industry leader, somebody was the chairman of a national organization from maybe, I won't out the person, it's his story to tell, but maybe from one of the most ruralist conservative ridings in the country. Okay. And I remember one time him saying to me, that Cody Blois, he's one of the good ones. And for those words to come out of that mouth about somebody that was a liberal from the Maritimes, coming from somebody that I'll say was from Alberta, says something. I talked to a number of different industry leaders throughout the last number of weeks. Everybody assumed this was Blois's job. This was Blois's job. It's not. We'll have to see where Cody Blois goes from here, but there's got to be a lot of disappointment. And again, this proves to everybody, politics is harsh. It is a harsh, cold world out there. And just because you put the time in, you pay your dues, you even pick the right leadership horse. Right away, I might add. You picked the right leadership horse. You were the pick prior to the election. And it doesn't get you the spot you wanted. It's got to be lots of disappointment from Cody Blois, indeed. And thoughts are out to him. Obviously, he's still going to represent the people of King Hans riding very well, or King Hants, I should say, in Nova Scotia. And Cody is he is one of the good ones for sure. And congratulations to Heath MacDonald on being appointed the Minister of Agriculture. There's going to be some critiques here of Carney's cabinet. I think we're going to hear it. A couple things. There was a push for gender equality. There was a push. In any cabinet, there's a push for geographical representation. Of course, that's somewhat limited by, hey, do you have MPs in all of the regions? Rural Canada not very well represented in this cabinet. That's not really a shocker. Urban people voted Liberal. Rural people voted Conservative, and that's what we end up with. So MacDonald is among 28 ministers and 10 secretaries of state named to the Prime Minister Mark Carney's post-election cabinet today. So I'm going to screw up Heath MacDonald's riding, but he is in Wayne Easter's old riding in PEI. And MacDonald served as the Minister of Economic Development and Tourism and then Minister of Finance for the province province of PEI up until about 2021. Then he was elected federally. Prior to entering provincial politics in 2015, MacDonald, who described himself as a blue liberal, worked in tourism and IT consulting. More recently, MacDonald was a member of the House of Commons Agriculture Committee from late 2023 until Parliament was prorogued earlier this year. We already talked about some of this other stuff. This is a story from RealAgriculture.com. So geographic representation was likely the main factor in Carney's decision to drop Blois, as fellow Nova Scotia MP Sean Fraser and Lena Medlaj-Diab were both given cabinet posts. MacDonald is also seen as filling a geographic void in Carney's pre-election cabinet, which did not have any representation from PEI following the departure of former Ag Minister Lawrence Macaulay. As for the other portfolios that affect Canadian agriculture, Julie Daberson was sworn in as Environment Minister. Chrystia Freeland remains Transport Minister, and Francois-Philippe Champagne stays as the Finance Minister. Dominic LeBlanc is now Minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade, intergovernmental affairs, and One Canadian Economy. See what that means. Remember, Mr. LeBlanc was the person that went down to Mar-a-Lago with Prime Minister Trudeau on that trip. Meninder Sidhu was named the new Trade Minister, and Marjorie Michel was tapped to serve as Health Minister. Northern Saskatchewan MP Buckley Belanger was named Secretary of State for Rural Development. We have a full list of all of the cabinet at RealAgriculture.com. Send me your thoughts. What's your reaction? What's your reaction? Are you pleased? Are you confused? I told you so? This is going to be different? It's not so different? We'll have to see. A lot of fresh faces, though. So a lot of people that are going to get the opportunity to play on the big stage that previously maybe new to politics or really were just a backbench. And to Carney's credit, a lot of people said that he had to make a really radical change. He couldn't have some of the same faces. Here's the other reality, okay? And it gets back to this geographical, when you put criteria around a cabinet, gender diversity, geographical representation, both important, don't get me wrong. But when you put those kinds of mandates on things, it's not always the best person that gets some of these spots. That's what happens. Here's the other dirty little secret. Okay, between us, there's the portfolios where it's like that person gets that position because they have that background. So you fill those out, and then you have a scattering of all these other cabinet positions where that's where you fill some of the mandates. And agriculture and a number of other positions are in that spot. Like, if you thought that agriculture, all of a sudden, because Carney was more businesslike, was going to somehow be up like with the finance minister or the minister of trade, sorry, not the case. Not the case at all. That's just the way that it is. So send me your thoughts. How do you feel about this? What would you have liked to have seen? Maybe you're happy, and tell me why. What did you think he nailed this? Did Carney nail it and get it right? Or is the response, you know what? Let's just wait and see. Let's not prejudge. We don't know all the names. We've all been to a conference, and you're like, the keynote speaker is that guy? Never heard of him. I've heard of all these other people, but I've never heard of that person. Like, that can't be very good. And then they blow you away. So maybe there's some backbenchers that Trudeau had, sort of packed in the back, didn't get an opportunity because there were some, friends of his or people in his inner circle that he felt he owed it to. Maybe some of those people are going to, you'll be in 2 years, will be like, oh, I see what happened here. I see what happened. They were buried. And Carney let them out. Let them fulfill the potential. That could be. Or it's like, need to do a cabinet shuffle because we need this person out of here. So send me your thoughts, and all of that. So, the way you do that, Haney at RealAgriculture.com, or, of course, you can call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-61 888-848-9747. Of course, on tomorrow's show, we're going to have more of a breakdown of this. I'm trying to convince Hepner he should come on with me for a segment or find somebody else to do it. And we will break all of it down and try to provide some analysis for you. And make sure you check out RealAgriculture.com, of course, where we're going to have lots of stories throughout the week. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Of course, we will chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.